Well, it's been a while since I ranked Season 7 of SpongeBob, mostly because I had a lot going on, and it's not fun to watch Season 8. But we did it. It's not as bad as Season 6 or 7, but it was still a very bad season. So let's start the ranking, starting with number 47. In last place I have Face Freeze. Surprisingly enough, this is one of the better worst episodes of the season. It's definitely not good, but it's not as bad as The Splinter or A Pal for Gary. But this episode really scared me as a child. When I was younger, Season 8 would come on a lot, and whenever this was on, I would always turn it off. And looking back at it, that was a good decision, because this episode is extremely bad. Pearl's entire personality is just being a teenager, which is why she's one of the worst characters in the show. Barnacle Face is so gross and obnoxious and just outright bad. I used to get this one mixed up with Gross Spout, but looking back at it, Gross Spout is so much better. At least it tries to do something. This one's just pathetic. The Way of the Sponge is about this weird karate master dude, and he's really annoying and not fun to look at and dumb and stupid and bad, and this episode is not good. Bad. Stupid. Pet Sitter Pat is one of the most infamous Patrick episodes, and it definitely deserves to be considered that, because it is. Patrick is obnoxious, and every scene with SpongeBob is obnoxious. Just an obnoxious episode. At least it's not boring, I guess, so that's why it's not last. Demolition Doofus is one of the episodes I never saw until making this video, and I always thought that it couldn't be as bad as everyone says, but no, Mrs. Puff literally tries to kill her student. It's still not the worst episode, but it's definitely not good, and I can see why it gets so much hate. Restraining SpongeBob is a really annoying episode. A Squidward torture episode where Patrick is the worst character, which is less common, but Patrick is terrible in this episode. Not to say that SpongeBob isn't bad either. Everyone sucks in this episode, which is why the episode sucks. I hadn't seen Squiditis before making this video, and I honestly forgot what happened, despite just watching it. That's how forgettable it was. I tried to milk an episode about Squidward faking a disease, and it sucked. Oral Report actually has some funny moments, but they're hard to find when most of the episode is so annoying and frustrating to watch. It's not boring, it's just repetitive, and Patrick is really annoying. It's also oddly similar to Boating School, the Season 1 episode. Man Ray working with Plankton had a potential to be one of the coolest episodes in the show, but they destroyed Man Ray in this episode. He didn't do anything and had very few lines of dialogue, which sucks because he was one of my favorite side characters in his episode in Season 3. Are You Happy Now is one of the most infamous episodes in the show, and I don't think it's as bad as some other ones, but yeah, Squidward's depression is not handled very well, and his hate for SpongeBob goes a little too far and seems stronger than it usually is, but at least they tried to do something new and didn't reuse new ideas like they did in other episodes this season. Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom is another episode where Patrick is the worst part. Squidward brings SpongeBob to a concert, but Patrick eats his tickets over and over again, and basically ruined the entire episode. It would have been better if it was anything other than Patrick that destroyed the tickets, because Patrick has no reason to be here other than to piss me off. Well, at least we got more Kelpie G. Every time Karen has a big role in an episode, she usually gets neglected by Plankton and he uses her, which sucks because she could be interesting. But Plankton only cares about the formula even when he's on a honeymoon with Karen. Also, walking the Plankton is just boring. Patrick's Staycation is another example of Patrick being an extremely annoying character, which happens a lot in Season 8 in fact. Patrick might be the worst part about this season. He was always dumb, but it just feels more mean than dumb in this season. A SquarePants Family Vacation is one of the worst SpongeBob specials. It's extremely forgettable and has some of the strangest settings in the whole show, and it makes everything very out of place. Also, they kept playing the Road song, which was a terrible song and got worse every time. Just a bad episode. The Krabby Patty that ate Bikini Bottom is just a no for me. It's just too weird. At least it tried something new, I guess. I still don't like it. Ghoul Fools just feels too unoriginal. We already have the Flying Dutchman, so why do we need more annoying ghost people? Not saying the Flying Dutchman is annoying, but these people are. They don't add anything to the show, and the Flying Dutchman is way better than the other ghosts. At least this episode is pretty creative. It definitely could have been worse. Accidents Will Happen is a terrible episode until the final minute. The payoff was funny, and I liked how Squidward just tried to sleep on the Krabby Patties, but I hate the stuff in the middle, with Mr. Krabs being a slave, who is just disturbing and not pleasant. The ending is very funny, though. Home Sweet Rubble is awfully similar to Home Sweet Pineapple, which brings it down a bit, because I don't think it's terrible. It has some funny jokes, and it's not boring. It just lacked originality, and doesn't set itself apart. I also don't even like Home Sweet Pineapple anyway. Squidward's School for Grown-Ups is weird, yet at the same time I don't hate it. It's not great, and the middle part is very slow to get through. And yet again, as Patrick is annoying in this episode, the season really wants to make us hate Patrick. We can't hate him though, because he was so funny in earlier seasons. Bubble Troubles is just whatever. It's not terrible, but it's definitely not good. There's some jokes that land, and some that fall flat. I don't like Sandy being all stupid and annoying. It gets irritating after a while. Not like if it was ever funny to begin with. This episode is just there. Am I the only one that doesn't think the Bubble Buddy thing is funny at all? Bubbles are the most forgettable part about the show, so maybe that's why. But the original and the sequel are not that funny to me. Bubble Buddy Returns is obviously worse. It's repetitive and there's nothing that funny. The reason it's not lower is because it doesn't do anything necessarily bad. Sentimental Sponge used to be one of my least favorite episodes, because hoarding used to freak me out. It still kinda does, but this episode isn't terrible. It has some funny moments, and I like when SpongeBob goes insane. It's always funny. I still wouldn't consider it good though. Treats is a pretty cool idea. I like Gary as a character, and usually the episodes about him are really good. And this one would be way higher if Gary wasn't extremely annoying. Seriously, his meowing was extremely annoying this episode. It was unlike him because he's usually pretty chill, but here he is irritating and brings down the episode. It's still solid other than that though. The Good Krabby name is weird because I don't remember anything particularly good about this episode, but at the same time I had a good time and there weren't any flaws. Promoting the Krusty Krab is a cool idea, and this episode executed it fairly well. I would consider this a tier above the other episodes so far. For Here or To Go is a nice little episode where Mr. Krabs tries to prevent Plankton from getting a Krabby Patty. Sounds familiar, huh? While the episode isn't the most creative, it's still fairly enjoyable, and the new character introduced is pretty funny. So this episode ends up ranking somewhere in the middle of Season 8, which I think is perfect. I love when Mr. Krabs destroys his fast food restaurant with a hammer to create more drive-thrus. It was pretty funny, just like the episode. This episode would be ranked higher in the previous 2 seasons. Move It or Lose It is a harmless Season 8 episode that has some funny moments, but in the end, it doesn't deserve more than 2 sentences talking about it. Free Samples is another okay Season 8 episode. Plankton tries to outduel Mr. Krabs by selling samples. I wish I could talk more about it, but it's not a very eventful episode. Fiasco is a pretty decent episode. It wouldn't be even close to this high if it was in the first 3 seasons, but for Season 8 standards, it's definitely on the better side. It's pretty funny, and Squidward is great. He's not in this season as much, but he's good when he is. Plankton's Good Eye is a nice little episode about Plankton turning into SpongeBob. It has some funny moments, and it's cool seeing Plankton do a complete 180 with his personality. Character changing personalities happens multiple times this season, and this is one of the best. Mr. Krabs is greedy, but when he's not affecting anyone, it's not bad. And in this one, he can be quite greedy. I don't think Mr. Krabs Takes a Vacation is great, but it would be one of the better episodes in Season 6 and 7. And it kind of is in Season 8. Googly Artist is a fun episode where Patrick becomes an artist. Not much to say about it, it's just okay, it's decent. The Other Patty is basically best frenemies all over again. Mr. Krabs and Plankton work together to try and figure out a formula. This time it's for some local burger joint that's getting all the attention. But in the end, it's actually SpongeBob who made the restaurant to make them become best friends. It lacks originality, but it is very good. House Sitting for Sandy is pretty funny, and one of the most hectic episodes in the season. So much stuff happens and it's hard to keep track of, but it's still entertaining. The ending is good too. This episode is just pretty good overall. Frozen Face Off is a really cool special episode with a winter race. The snowy atmosphere is always cool in SpongeBob, but this setting might be my favorite of the snowy ones. I love the icebergs and the frozen lakes. I also think the monster is cool. This is just a really good special episode. One of the better ones in modern SpongeBob. Karen 2.0 is a nice wholesome episode, where once again Plankton abandons Karen and then redeems himself. On paper, this episode is nothing special, but it's still really enjoyable for some reason. One of the better Karen episodes of the season, maybe even the entire show. Glove World R.I.P. is an episode I used to rewatch constantly when I was younger, mainly because I love that they actually gave Glove World these creative rides. I loved that before, and I still really enjoy it. It feels like this is the only episode where Glove World is actually trying to be an amusement park. Also, why is Glove World never actually shown in SpongeBob? I feel like they just forgot about it. I mean, I don't watch too much modern SpongeBob, but still, it's never there. And even in the original episodes, I feel like SpongeBob just doesn't like Glove World very much. Chum Fricassee is an episode that's even higher on other lists. While it was good enough to make my top 10, I don't find it good enough to be any higher. Squidward and Plankton working together is a really cool idea, but I think there's another episode in the season that does that idea better, and you'll see it very shortly. Sweet and Sour Squid is the second episode in a row where Squidward and Plankton work together. And I said that there was a better one that would come up shortly. Well, this is it. I prefer this one better because it focuses on Squidward's interests, which are clarinets, where Chum Fricassee focuses on the chum bucket. This one focuses on the clarinet, which I think is way more interesting. And the song in the middle is very funny. Hello Bikini Bottom is an episode I liked better when I was younger. It's still pretty good, but the middle part kinda drags for a while. The ending is the good part though. The song, while not sounding very good, is a pretty cool moment and kinda makes up for the boringness of the middle, and the greedy guy is funny. Just a very good special episode. In Spongiac is a very visually appealing episode, and a relatable one. Having trouble sleeping is a problem everyone faces, including myself, and this episode explores it pretty well. My only problem is the ending. It's just really weak and they could have done something way better. Mermaid Man Begins is one of the coolest ideas for an episode. A origin story of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy is really cool, and they executed it really well. I got a little crazy with the backstory, but it's SpongeBob, so I don't mind. This one just missed out on the top 5, it easily could have been there. A Friendly Game is one of the episodes I watched the most when I was younger. I grew up with this season, so a lot of these rankings include personal bias, but it's my list, so I don't care if it includes bias. This episode is still funny, and the concept of playing mini golf in SpongeBob's house is great, and the second half in Squidward's house is hilarious. The Hot Shot is just really funny. The new character is hilarious, and I love his interactions with SpongeBob. This is one of the best boating episodes in the show, and I've always enjoyed watching it. It never gets old and all the jokes land. We're at the point where these episodes are actually really great, which separates the season from the last two. There's actually great episodes. There's just a lot of bad ones, but we're past that now. Mooncation is a very visually appealing episode, and the moon is portrayed as such a cool setting. The tricks SpongeBob and Sandy do on the moon are really creative, and all of it makes for a very fun and enjoyable episode. Weirdly enough, I never saw this episode until this video, but it was still good enough to be in the top 3, so yeah, this episode is amazing. Planet of the Jellyfish is usually considered one of the better SpongeBob episodes in seasons 6 through 8, and I think that's justified. It's really creative and had a really cool premise. They easily could have made this a special episode. It has a very big scale, and there's a longer story compared to other episodes, but it turned out great. Just not great enough to be number 1, because number 1 is one of my personal favorites. In my video where I ranked the 25 best SpongeBob episodes, I ranked this one on here, so you probably expected It's the SpongeBob Christmas to be number 1 if you watched that video. Yeah, I love this episode. It's not as good as Christmas Who, but it still captures a Christmas feeling and the animation looks great. This will always be a personal favorite and an annual rewatch. So in a weaker season like Season 8, it is definitely my favorite episode. Well, we finally got through the worst seasons of SpongeBob, 6 through 8, and now we can move on to the better ones, with Season 9 being next, in probably around a month or two.